From AATH, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor, this is Laughbox, the podcast for laughter and humor professionals. Here's your host, Chip Lutz.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Laughbox, the official podcast for the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Today, and today only, I've got Ann Zuccardy on the line. Now, I first met Ann in Philadelphia a few years ago at a National Speakers Association conference. I didn't actually know I was meeting her because I had a fresh cup of coffee, and I was sitting at this table next to this woman that was really pretty, and I opened up Twitter, and I looked at it, and a tweet said something, "I'm going to club you over the head and steal your coffee." And then it was Ann, and we've been buds ever since. At first, I thought, well, that's kind of a weird text, and then she was kind of laughing next to me, and I realized, oh, that must be her. So that was it. And then a few years ago, also in Philadelphia, she keynoted for the association, which was very good. She is a TEDx speaker, a keynote speaker. She is also an accidental neuroscientist, which we'll get into a little bit later, which will be pretty cool. So welcome, Ann.
Hello, Chip. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you want to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, what's your gig? What's your bag, baby?
What's my bag? I do a lot of things. I am primarily, first and foremost, right now, a graduate student getting my master's degree in English, believe it or not. I've been waiting 33 years to do this. But I am a speaker and a writer, and I speak about creativity and neuroplasticity, which is the idea that our brains can change and make new neural connections throughout our lifetimes. I speak about innovation and laughter, and how laughter helps our brains stay healthy and how it helps us learn. And most recently, I have become a laughter yoga leader. So I'm hoping to bring that into the corporate world to help with communications and team building.
How fun. I'm interested on the whole neuroplasticity thing, because I know in high school I killed a lot of brain cells. And I was just thinking, everybody said you never got them back. So I'm hoping that you're going to tell me something different today.
Well, I know you were in high school a long time ago, as was I. And back then, in the olden days, they believed that your brain was set for life. So once you reached a certain age, that was it. You killed off some brain cells, that was it. That part of your brain was gone. But what we have learned since then is this concept of neuroplasticity. So when certain neural connections are disconnected, like if you have a head injury, which I had a few years back, you can create new neural connections, new pathways to do the same things that you were used to doing. But that requires you, going through some discomfort and trying lots of different ways of doing things. But the cool thing about that is we can do that right up until the day we die.
That is good news, because I really thought I was on a downward spiral, because I'm not going to tell you what I did to kill brain cells.
Yeah.
But did regular high school stuff.
Yeah, so, me too. And there's hope. There's hope. We, even though we are aging and it's slower now for us, we can still. I mean, I've even seen it in my father who has dementia. I still see him creating new pathways, and yes, he forgets 5 minutes later what he's done, but it's really cool to watch.
How did you become an accidental neuroscientist?
So that's a moniker I gave myself. That's not something I went to school for.
You can't get a degree in accidental neuroscience?
Yeah, I'm not really a neuroscientist, hence the accidental piece of it. I fell in a bathtub in 2011. I fell in a bathtub in Germany, and I had a traumatic brain injury, a mild traumatic brain injury, which mild only refers to the impact, not necessarily the long-term effects of that brain injury. So through that process of recovery, I learned a lot of things about how my brain worked. And then later on, through my reading and through connections with people who were experts, I learned that what I was figuring out was actually backed up by science. So I was like, okay, I'm pretty brilliant. I already figured this stuff out. I don't need no scientific research. And but I became very interested in the science behind how the brain works. So so now that's what I speak about, and I'm really interested in teaching other people how to be more creative and innovative and resilient and curious without getting whacked on the head.
How did you know that you fell? You obviously hit your head. How did you know it was worse than just the normal bump? I mean, what were some of the things that were going on?
Well, that took some time. I mean, every brain is different, right? And the kind of brain injury I had usually resolves itself within 3 or 4 weeks when you just rest your brain. So I came home from this trip to Germany, and I was just I was slurring my words, and I was kind of walking like a drunkard and just, acting kind of goofy. And I thought, well, it's either jet lag or menopause or something. So I was just, I kind of blew it off. But over the course of 3 or 4 days, my symptoms got worse and worse. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and I was vomiting, and I had the worst headache of my entire life. And I was like, gosh, I really don't want it to end like this. Mm-hmm. So I went to the hospital, and I had a CAT scan, and they actually didn't even see anything on the CAT scan. Told me to go home and rest. And that was the last I ever saw of my corporate job and my life as I knew it prior to that. Yeah.
Just because it was that bad, where it was.
Yeah. Now, like I said, typically, these kinds of injuries resolve themselves after a few weeks. But in my case, things kept getting worse. And my primary care physician didn't really know what to do with me, kept telling me to rest, kept telling me to take it easy, and nothing was getting better. Some things were getting worse. So I, being the writer that I've always been and the social media presence that I've always been, started blogging about my experience. I started a blog called iwantmybrainback.com and wrote about my frustrations, and wrote about how hard it was for me to figure out what kind of help I needed, because on the surface I looked pretty normal.
Well, that's relative.
Yeah. So this blog started getting a lot of traffic, and I started hearing from a lot of people who were having similar experiences, and finding resources that I needed, and learning about what kinds of specialists I needed to see, and realizing that indeed every brain is different, and what might work for one person may not work for me. So, I just started exploring all my options and being very assertive, because I was pretty high functioning. So I was able to assert for myself. I can't imagine what it'd be like if I couldn't have. Mm-hmm. So I got the help that I needed. And through that, started garnering some attention. And that's how I got my first TEDx talk.
So I've seen your TEDx talk, but I don't know if anybody else has. What are the things that you hit on that in that platform?
My first TEDx talk was in 2013. It's called How a Brain Injury Made Me Smarter. And if you Google it, you can find it. But what I talked about is I kind of challenged conventional ideas about what makes people smart. Prior to my brain injury, I thought I was smart because I was always a good student, and I was always a good earner, and I was well read, and I could speak a bunch of languages, and everything was just hunky-dory. And that's kind of how I define smart. And after the brain injury, I could not read. I had a hard time with reading, a hard time with writing, a hard time with just walking across the street, and doing basic things. And it kind of, my whole ego just kind of took a nosedive, and I became very depressed because everything that I had defined myself by was suddenly just gone, and I didn't know who the heck I was. And through the process of my recovery and figuring out new ways to do old things that I wanted to do, I realized that what I was doing was actually creating new neural connections and being very creative. Which was, so I had always been creative prior to the brain injury. And I learned that I was building resilience, and I learned that curiosity also makes us smart, always asking, why, like a 3-year-old. is what makes us smart. So the talk was about the things that I now believe make people smart, and it isn't necessarily about IQ and grades and all of that stuff.
Thank God.
Thank God, huh?
I mean, that's how I ended up in the Navy. I think I graduated like 499 out of 600 in my class. And my dad was
my gosh.
You got Z's in high school. I just don't see me paying for your college. So it's nice to see that there's still hope for me in my intelligence, that maybe I'm smart in other ways.
Well, there is, just as a little aside, my undergrad GPA was abysmal, and I just like kind of drank and ate my way through my undergraduate degree. And now as a graduate student in my 50s, I'm like, I got my first B last week, and it was like a crisis.
Well, I teach some grad classes, and I tell because my students always get upset. Well, how come, I got a B on this, and I because it wasn't an A paper. I mean, I don't know what you want me to tell you. And then I explained to him is that since graduating college or, grad school, not once has anybody ever asked me my GPA.
Exactly.
Ever. I would want them to, because it's one of those things, like I said, I out of 600 kids in my high school class, I got voted class clown. That's why my grades were bad. But, I would love for somebody to ask me my GPA now, but nobody ever has.
I know.
So
Isn't that funny? Nobody cares except us. But
nobody cares.
So I told my mother that I have straight A's now, and when I was younger, we used to get a hot fudge sundae at Friendly's, which is the local ice cream store,
right,
when we were kids. So I keep emailing my mother and saying, I want my damn sundae.
That's really funny. That's hilarious. With looking at the whole creativity thing, and I know that you're a part of the association, but what are some things that have helped you, be more creative or bridge that gap in your brain, so to speak, since the TBI?
Let's see. I would say the number one thing has been challenge to do things in a different way. I mean, you don't have to be more creative. You don't have to go out and learn how to play the cello or the violin or something like that. You can, and that certainly helps. But I mean, it's like little everyday things. It's like, I always tell people when I do a keynote, I always ask them which hand they use to eat. And I explain that whatever hand you don't use is your non-dominant hand. And then I will challenge them to eat their lunch with their non-dominant hand, and sometimes I even give them a hashtag, and I'll ask them to post pictures or tweet about the experience, because when we do something a different way, I mean, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, you make a mess, you spill things all over yourself, it's dorky, but that's how you create a new neural pathway. So it can be little things like that. It can be little things like, driving a different way to work, or I don't know, just doing a routine in a different order than you usually do it. That kind of just forces your brain to work a little harder, mm-hmm. and that aids in creativity. The other thing that I have found really useful is humor and play. Mm-hmm. No surprise. Since starting to do laughter yoga, at first I thought it was some silly thing. I didn't really realize there was any science in it.
You look at it when you're on the outside before you do it. It's kind of like looking like it's a cult. Like, what are these people doing?
I thought so. I thought it was just some.
What are they laughing about?
Weird thing. But then I started reading about it, and I started reading the science behind it. And I mean, it's real. When we, our brains do not know the difference between spontaneous laughter, like when someone tells us a joke, and manufactured laughter, when we just look at each other and go, our brains don't know the difference. Both are equally good for us. So if you do the manufactured laughter combined with some breathing and stretching every day, it's really good. And there is science to back this up. So, that's really helpful. And what's good for me is I grew up in a very funny, goofy, silly family. So I've always had that in my toolbox, but I didn't realize it was like a real thing.
Neat. So how has humor played into your the whole thing? You said that humor helps a lot with neuroplasticity. Hey, what are some of the things that happen with humor?
I think it's just, it's, our brains are wired for negativity, right? It's called negativity bias. And that served us well back when we were cavemen, you know, because we had to be afraid. We had, you know, otherwise would be a tiger's lunch. But that doesn't serve us so well anymore. But our brains are still wired that way. So if we can counterbalance that negativity bias with some laughter and gratitude and positive stuff, and I don't mean like fake positivity stuff, I mean real stuff, like finding humor in goofy situations. Oh dear, I just tripped in the grocery store and spilled all my groceries. Like, no. You know, it's like finding the humor in every day. It can be really helpful, and that helps to counter that negativity bias, that fear, that innate fear and anxiety that we all have.
That's easier for some people than others, isn't it? Have you found that? I mean, for me, it's easy for me to find the humor in the situations, even like really crappy situations. I can laugh about it and find the humor in it. But I know other people, they have a lot more difficult time finding the humor in situations.
It is really hard. So with people like that, like if I were to do laughter yoga in a business of like, you know, lawyers or CPAs, I'd have a very different approach than if I were to do it with first graders, you know, like, you know, you would go very lightly and, you know, just really, I wouldn't make people hug and kiss and, you know, do crazy things. So yeah, but I mean, just the act of smiling creates endorphins. And I'm sorry, if you can't smile, then
I seem to remember a couple of years ago, there was, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago, there was a report where Japanese transit workers had to like smile into a machine and, you know, score like a 70 or better in order to clock in for work. And what they found was it actually, you know, it improved their mood, but it gave them, you know, once they did that, since it improved their mood, they had better interactions with customers and so forth. I'm going to look and see where I can find that and see if it's still going on. Like if it was a study or something they really had to do, or if it was just, but I just, you know, seem to remember that. And I'm a firm believer that very rarely will I smile at somebody and not get a smile back. Unless it's a really creepy smile, you know, like if I'm smiling at some attractive woman and I'm like, hey, I might not get a
yeah.
It might be a little more, might get something else in return, like a slap or something, but
yeah, or the finger or something like that. Yeah.
Which finger is that?
But that's true. And I'd be curious about that study that you were just talking about. I mean, it's like, you know, common in customer service for people to, you know, look into a mirror and smile while they're talking on the phone. I have a mirror right next to my desk here that you can't see, but I frequently look in it to check my hair and smile at myself.
I do that too with a mirror that I have, but what ends up happening is I usually leave lip prints on it. I'm just like, it's like, you look so sexy. I just give myself a big kiss right there. It's really embarrassing. Then my wife goes and looks at the mirror and she's like, have you been kissing yourself again? I'm like, no, I think the dog was licking it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You spread peanut butter on the dog was licking it. Mm-hmm. That happens here too.
So you mentioned that your dad, has dementia, which is a difficult thing, you know, as a child, you know, a family member to go through. Do you still find that there's humor that you can find in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, my dad's the one who taught me about humor, and you know, 2 years ago, they gave him 6 months to live, and here he is 2 years later, you know, eating double portions at the nursing home. And his body is still pretty strong, but his brain is gone. So, but yeah, there's still humor in it. And I'm actually going to do some laughter yoga at his nursing home. But yeah, his sense of humor is still pretty good. I mean, like, you know, it's on and off with dementia. You never know what's going to come out of their mouths. But, you know, sometimes things will come out of his mouth and we'll just like roll over laughing because It's like, where the hell did that come from? But he's always been that way, so
right.
it's cool. And I mean, you have to laugh because it goes on and on and on, and you're like, oh, when is this ever going to end? And you don't want it to end because you know what that means. But if you can't laugh, then it can be really depressing and it can really drag you down. And so what I've learned is that it's possible to hold two seemingly paradoxical, I don't even know how to say that, two opposite emotions at the same time. So I can be very sad and full of grief, but I can also laugh at the same time, and that's okay, and that's actually good.
Mm-hmm. I know that my dad didn't have dementia, but he after his stroke, he couldn't remember anything. He'd get all frustrated, and for a caregiver, the whole process is difficult. But having a sense of humor and laughing at stuff really helped my mom and I connect, but also helped us cope with the different situations that we were dealing with. I remember it was a couple of years ago, my mom went to a quilt show, and I went down to stay with my dad for 4 days, and every day he wanted to go for a drive, so we'd go for a little drive. And finally one day, because they live about an hour and a half from Springfield, Illinois, and I said, tomorrow we should go to the Lincoln Museum. Go to the Lincoln Museum, see that. And so next day, pack up, we drive an hour and a half over. I push around in a wheelchair all through the Lincoln Museum, and just had a grand old time. And my mom got home the next day, and I was so proud of myself. I took Dad on this big adventure. Man, I'm such a good son. And so I told my mom, I said, yeah, well, Dad and I, we went to the Lincoln Museum. And she looked at my dad and said, Gene, we've been there. And he's like, we have? I don't remember that. And my mom and I would just start rolling, just laughing, because it was just so funny that he'd been there before. But it was funnier to me because I was thinking, oh man, I'm such a great son, taking Dad on a big trip, someplace he's never been before. And he'd already been there. He just remembered it. So
I got this great idea. This is kind of an aside, but same sort of thing. And I came up with this idea, and I think this would be good for anyone dealing with dementia. So when I was a little girl, my dad used to read to me and tell great stories just that he made up in his own head. But I remember one of my favorite books was the Amelia Bedelia books. I don't know if you've ever read those, but Amelia Bedelia was a maid who takes everything very literally. So, her boss says to draw the curtains, so she draws the curtains, with a pencil and a paper. And in one of the scenes, her instruction is to buy a chicken and to dress it. And so Amelia Bedelia takes that literally, and she makes a little outfit for the chicken and dresses it. And there's a picture of a chicken with a little suit on. So when I was a little girl, my father used to read me that book. And whenever we got to that page, like I would know that page was coming up, and I would sit there in anticipation, because he would turn the page and he'd get to that page and he would just burst out laughing, like almost crying. He wouldn't be able to stop. So one of the things that I have done to connect with him now in his dementia in the nursing home is I'll read books from my childhood, and I'll read that Amelia Bedelia book to him. And it still happens. I'll still say, Dad, I'm getting to your favorite part. And he just busts out laughing, and we'll sit there laughing for 5 minutes. I don't even know if he he definitely remembers it. It's long-term memory, right? That was like 50 years ago. But so it's really cool. So that's been really helpful for us. I read these children's books, and we just sit there laughing at the stupidity and absurdity of them.
Oh, but that's good stuff. And what great, from my perspective, I mean, just what great memories, you're going to have from that.
Absolutely.
On spending that time.
Yeah.
So you had one TED Talk. What was your second TED Talk? Was it in the same vein, or was it something different?
Nope. My second one, first one was in 2013. Second one was in 2014. And it was sort of a follow-on to my first one. It's called How Being Unsafe Makes You Smarter. And it was kind of following along with that idea of neuroplasticity. When we try things that are new or feel different to us, we make a mess, and that's kind of scary. And that's okay. And so I call that the safe unsafe. So, trying new things that aren't like, physically unsafe, but, just kind of put us out of our comfort zones. And for me, I tested my safe unsafe by going to Haiti in 2014 and doing some medical mission work there. And, I really didn't know if I had the physical stamina or emotional stamina to handle it. But, so I talked a little about what I learned, and about how humans have this tendency when we know something, like that's the way it is. We've all heard of confirmation bias. We tend to find the ideas that confirm what we already believe, right? Mm-hmm. So in challenging those and getting out of our safe zones and into, sort of unsafe zones, like talking to someone who has a different political affiliation than you do, perhaps. That's very unsafe these days.
Yes, it is. Well, it's actually really safe on Facebook, because people will just spew all their bile out on, Facebook, and I'm just like, man, so many angry people out there.
So many angry, but there's so much confirmation bias going on there. And if you watch it from an objective point of view, and you watch it from like a curious point of view, like, you look at the stuff that people post, and no matter what way you feel about what's going on, you notice that people post the things that confirm what they already believe. Mm-hmm. Whether it's true or not is another thing. But, so like really stepping out of the anger and the feelings and looking at like, well, does this confirm what I already believe? Or, how does this challenge me is really good for our brains. And, asking hard philosophical questions that have no answers to them, that's really good for our brains too. That's why meditation and prayer are so good for us. Are you doing that now?
I'm thinking about the questions I don't have answers to. Like, if 4 out of 5 people suffer from diarrhea, does that mean one person actually enjoys it? Deep thoughts.
Suffering is a choice.
Suffering is a choice. That is awesome. Now, we talked before with the whole neuroplasticity thing, and we had talked about play being a part of that, and we talked about like what I would call and you would call neuroplasticity. Using play to expand those and make those new connections in your brain. What are some of the things you found with play and how it relates to making your brain a little healthier?
I think that, you think about children, go to a playground and watch children play, not like in a creepy kind of way, but like, don't be a creeper, but
right.
Watch.
Don't get the police involved.
Yeah. Just watch. I mean, like, a child can take anything, well, most children, but take anything and make something out of it. I remember my daughter making dolls out of Legos. And I'm like, that's not a doll, that's a Lego. But just watching kids do that, I think, and joining in with it, people think like that's, idle time, but it's really good for our creativity. Even things like, I don't know, I hula hoop. I have a hula hoop. Going outside and hula hooping and, just getting your body moving. All the science points to that when our bodies are moving, our brains are more active as well.
Right. I remember in Dr. John Medina's book, Brain Rules. I'm sure you've read that. But
I love that book.
Yeah, where he talks about our brains are meant for walking 20 miles a day. That's the amount of oxygen that they need in order for us to really function optimally, and that most of us don't get near the amount of oxygen to our brains that we need. But it's funny you say hula hoop, because I have never been able to hula hoop. I've got rhythm. I'm not coordinated enough. I can't do it. I end up looking like I'm having some kind of seizure or something. That's what it looks like.
I could teach you. You give me 20 minutes, I could teach you. I know I could.
20 minutes with Ann Zuccardy, and she can teach me to hula hoop.
I could.
That sounds. I'm in for the challenge. Bring
it
to April.
In April, I'll bring my travel hoop.
How? Shut up! You have a travel hoop?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It snaps together. It's pieces that snap together, and it makes a big hoop. We're doing it.
I had no idea there was such a thing. I've learned so much today.
I'm a certified hoop instructor.
I didn't know there was one of those either.
Yeah.
You are a woman of many talents.
Yeah, I'm a Renaissance woman.
Many, many talents. That's funny. So, you have any recommendations for people? I mean, they don't have to have a TBI to be more creative and be more innovative and to, make new connections in their brain. What are some things, just like quick tips you would suggest for people just to keep their brains healthy?
First thing, sleep more.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, sleep or lack of sleep is so bad for our brains, and there's lots of science coming out around that too. And I think, in our culture, we look at sleeplessness as this virtue. I worked 16 hours today and I only slept for 4. I'm so wonderful. And that's really doing damage to your brain. Sleep is when your brain clears out lots of that, what's it called? Anyways. Yep.
Clears out all the crap.
Clears out the crap. Yeah,
that is a scientific technical term I just used right there.
Yeah, crap.
Yeah.
But sleep is really important. I have to sleep now because of the brain injury. I just can't function with less than 7 hours of sleep a night. So I would say sleep. I would say also to feed your brain with good foods. Fish oils are very good. I mean, there's so many supplements out there on the market now. Everybody's selling a supplement for something. But, omega-3 fatty acids found in fish like salmon, and you can buy them in supplements too, are scientifically proven to be good for our brains and good for our hearts. Anything that's good for your heart is good for your brain. So exercise, good food. But here's an interesting fact. Your brain, I hope I get this right. Your brain makes up about 3% of your body weight, but it requires about 20% of your caloric intake.
Really?
Properly. So you really, so sugar is just about the worst thing you can be doing. And good, high protein, omega-3 fatty acids are the best things you can be doing. So, and you have to change everything and become like, some health food nut, but certainly just being aware of that and adding a little bit can help. I'm not a nutritionist, but I know these things are true.
But you have stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. I don't know if you can hear it now. I've got, I live on a farm, so like the roosters are right outside the window where I'm recording this, and they're like cock-a-doodle, and I don't know if you could hear that or not. So I wanted to.
I can't hear it. That's so funny.
I'm glad that you can't. So I was like, oh man, I hope those don't come through. But if they do, everybody knows now that I have chickens and roosters. So, eating good food, getting plenty of sleep.
That's so fun.
What else can people do?
Moving more, of course. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Laughing more. I mean, these are all things anybody can do. Trying to do things in a different way. Trying to brush your teeth with your opposite hand. Trying to eat a meal with your opposite hand. Getting dressed in the dark. I don't know. Anything. Like, be fun. Have fun with it.
Getting dressed in the dark. I've gotten undressed in the dark, but I don't think I've ever We're going to keep this PG. But those are all good. I'm going to try some of those just to challenge my brain because I love routines. I love my routines. And usually when I have to step outside my comfort zone, I usually step out pretty big just to kind of like jolt my system. But I do find that when I do that, I have new experiences that help me out. But two, I usually jar something in my brain. It was like, oh, I never thought that this was the case. Just like what I was telling my kids with their undergraduate studies when they're going to school. They're like, oh, I hate this class. And I said, you know what? I've never taken a class that I didn't get something from. It might not have been the thing the teacher was trying to get across to me, but it was like brain aerobics where it's like, this connects with that. And so for me, I always try to be a lifelong learner because it helps me just keep my brain a little more active as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
and as we get older, as we become more, as we adult more, we do become more set with our routines and our rituals. And so, just slap yourself now and then and just, have a day of non-routine, non-ritual.
Slap yourself or have somebody else slap you. That works too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's your military background. You guys like everything, just so. I know that.
Well, it is. Well, and you're married to a military guy. That's what's so great about my wife, Gwen, is that she is completely always just in the moment. It drives her crazy that when I travel, I'll just stay in the hotel room the whole weekend. She's like, why don't you out go and do something? Do something. I'm like, what do I need to do? I've got 4 walls. I got cable TV. I got Wi-Fi, Netflix. I got it all. I got it all right here. I don't need to do it. She always is pushing me outside my comfort zone. So I get out of my routine, which is yang to my yang.
Yeah. This sounds so familiar.
Is that what you do?
Oh my gosh, yes. Brian, I mean, everything is neat and organized, and he's also an engineer. He's also a mechanical engineer, so everything's got to be symmetrical and organized, and his little piles, and we have side-by-side walk-in closets, and I open mine, and it's there's just stuff everywhere and color everywhere. You open his, and there's his uniforms, and then there's his play shirts, and then there's his jeans, and it's all organized by sleeve length and color, and I'm like, oh.
Sounds like my kind of guy. I remember being in a client's office one time, and we were sitting there talking about an event that I was coming up for, and things on her desk were a little bit discombobulated. So I started just put them in nice little stacks. And she was looking at me like, "What is wrong with you?"
Oh.
It was like I can't help it. It's just I want them symmetrical. So
yeah.
Well,
do you organize the dishwasher too? When you move the dishwasher, do you
no.
organize it for optimal efficiency?
No, I do not.
Okay.
But I don't have a dishwasher. I just wash dishes.
Oh God, who does that?
I'm old school.
Okay.
I use palm olive, so it keeps my hands nice and clean. Clean and pretty and so forth.
That's nice. You do have lovely hands.
Well, thank you. Just remember Madge from when we were growing up. You're soaking in palm olive. We're going way back to Mr. Whiffle times. Well, Ann, I have had a really good time talking to you. For those of you who don't know, you should go to Ann's website. What is your website? So if you want to tell everybody where they can find you.
AnnZuccardy.com, AnnZuccardy, and I'm the only Ann Zuccardy, so if you Google me, there's you'll know who it is. And I'm all over social media too.
She is all over social media. If you Google her name and look at the images, it's just images and come up, and I am just waiting for one bad picture. I've said you this, Ann has never taken a bad picture in her entire life.
Yes, I have.
I've never seen them. You keep them well hidden. Even last year when we were at the National Speakers Association conference, and you had an accident, and you had, I think, a little bit of was it a black eye?
Oh yeah.
Even that picture was great. I was like, yes, I finally get to get a bad picture of Ann, and then we took it, and it was like, what the heck? How come I look like a middle-aged hog, but Ann looks awesome, even with the black eye? It's crazy. Crazy.
Thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate you spending a little time with us. I know people will get some great benefit listening to strategies you were given for keeping your brain a little bit healthier. I highly suggest everybody go to Ann's website, check it out, watch her TED Talks. They're really interesting, really good stuff. And if you need a little more information on AATH, go to our website, aath.org. That's athwithalisp.org. Check it out. Check us out. Consider coming to the conference, and maybe you can learn to hula hoop with Ann. So thanks again for being with me.
Thank you, and I'll see you in Orlando.
I will see you there. Thank you.
This is Laughbox, the podcast for laughter and humor professionals. Laughbox is made possible by a grant from the National Speakers Foundation and is brought to you by AATH, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Find out more at aath.org. Be sure to review Laughbox on iTunes. For show notes and more information about today's conversation, visit laughbox.aath.org.